Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Together We Write. Um, we are changing things up a little bit. Why am I so blurry? Anywho, all right. So today we're going to be talking about postmortems. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that because it's a fairly straightforward uh, concept. Most everyone's somewhat familiar with the fundamentals of what we're talking about with postmortems, but also want to spend some time talking about and demonstrating ChatGPT and some other tools that utilize, specifically writing tools that use this technology. Now, this is something that we've been here at UWGB. We've been toying with this for as long as it's been released since around about November. I was demonstrating it to uh, courses of a variety of courses, actually. And so I do want to spend some time kind of going through it. Some of the tools that I'm going to be looking at, I just pulled up on the search today. In fact, I used one tool to create a list of writing tools, and it turned out some interesting results. Not entirely perfect, as anyone who's used this technology has will quickly discover it's not as precise as we would like it to be for what is often or what is marketed as artificial intelligence is really not terribly intelligent when it comes to what you would think would be a very simple uh, check, right? So anyway, we've got a workshop coming up on Friday here on campus. Jenny Young, Kate Farley, and I are going to be talking a second part in a three-part series of workshops, discussions based on Chat GPT. If you're interested in attending, though it is more aimed at instructors, particularly writing instructors or instructors who use a lot of writing curricula in their courses. I don't see why anyone who's interested couldn't participate. Great turnout on the first one. Second one, we're going to be focusing on writing. Then this final workshop, the last date escapes me. We need to do a better job marketing ourselves. Will be on creating authentic assessments. So we're trying to avoid this question about plagiarism, and we're going to hold off on that until the last one, until we can get our to be perfectly honest, a lot of this we've been going into these workshops. Well, I can only speak for myself. Iftikhar, another colleague who is coming from computer science, led the first one and gave us sort of an under the hood peek. And um, we are not. Um, I, I won't speak for Jenny, but I'm not as savvy. I'm intrigued, definitely interested. It makes sense. I get a sense of what the technology is doing, but more from a amateur hobbyist. Right? It's nothing I could. Um, yeah, I could probably, with a little instruction and fuddling around, make use of the API, but just don't have the time to spend on that. Oh, what happened to my sound all of a sudden? Anyway, maybe it's just my ears. So let's just go ahead and jump into the postmortem process. I do want to, give it an hour or so. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about this, and I've been distracted all morning by some GPT stuff. So, um, anyway, postmortems. What are they? Uh, when we are concluding any sort of project or significant phase Anytime we complete something significant that is complex enough that warrants taking a look back, what went well, what didn't go so well. It could be for a classroom, for example, it could be every assignment if we wanted to do that. If we had the time, we could, for my case, I typically do this we just we're doing some in my courses right now because of that. We just got back from spring break, and it's a really odd time, and I would even use the word difficult for some of us to get back into the swing of things. So, postmortem is a form of, I would say, professional communications. There's writing involved, it really is more of a collaboratory environment where there's dialogue and then there's writing and maybe some additional dialogue, however you go about it. And there are a number of ways of approaching it. The way I approach it is tech light or tech nil, because the postmortems come from the technical fields, especially software development, where this is a critical component in managing those lengthy, complex projects where you've got people coming and going, lots of cooks in the kitchen, and and so when you have those sort of dynamics, it's worth pausing before, anyone who's worked enough knows that there are very rarely lulls, or you hope that there are rarely lulls. It usually means there's a lack of work, which can be a concern. But um, when it's worth taking time. Well, we resist this that. So a postmortem, think about it as sort of like a intermission or a transition between one project or one phase to the next. Okay. And so when you are conducting this, I mean, one of the questions or the critiques about postmortems is that it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes energy, usually away time from something that could be happening. You could be working on that next project. Maybe there are deadlines looming, but as we'll see, this is a way of improving efficiency, making small improvements, implementing small changes into what is often an already existing system, process where you un- take it apart, put it back together again, and start to think from, just like we do in design thinking, getting everyone at the table, okay, rather than a sort of top down, okay, management has decided this is the change we're going to make without really thinking or considering the impacts that it will have on everyone who's actually involved in that process. Not to say managers are not involved in these processes, but they usually have a very different perspective and motivation. So, for example, one of my favorite all time stories from when I worked in the printing industry is they were taking on some new, what was it called? Lean manufacturing uh, techniques to improve the overall efficiency of what we were doing. And printing at the time, the web was coming up, and it was a challenge, and it was disconcerting for a lot of managers who really saw internet technology and screen-based platforms and services as taking over the domain of print. And by and large, that's a justified concern. Certainly, print is still with us, but there were definitely impacts. on the printing industry. I would be willing to bet that we lost, I would say, a quarter to a fifth of print shops, mostly small independent ones. But I can't be sure about that. I haven't seen too many stats. I left that life behind a long time ago. Anyway, so amidst all of this, and if you've ever worked for a place who is struggling, or you have owners or managers who are always pushing for greater profit, greater viability, you've been in those situations where they're trying to eke out every penny, every second, anything to make just a smidge more cash, right? And regardless of how you feel about that, this is the way things are going. The way a lot of the reason why we are adopting techniques and certain technologies, perspectives, and approaches is to, especially in a data-driven economy like we're moving towards, if not already in, we are looking to eke out all of those seconds and pennies as we can. All right, so coming from this um, time, what it was, so this is my first um, introduction to what I now like to call instead design thinking. But it was this sort of lean manufacturing, which is coming from, I believe, Toyota. A lot of these details are hazy, so forgive me. But it is like improving manufacturing and making things so efficient, so hyper efficient that everything flows smoothly and errors are corrected. And one of the great things about the original, what was actually inspiring, and this is not usually something I would get interested in, but one of the cool things about it is the premise is that it's a very level playing field. While you do have managers and supervisors, you also have line workers and everyone involved with a process at the table with input and suggesting changes, no bad ideas, all this good stuff. And so for me, that was very interesting. I'd never worked in an environment where you would even consider taking input from, you know, average employee, I guess, for lack of a better word. And so you go through this process. You say, okay, here's where this is our, at the time, our pre-press. This is and you spend a day, and you take it apart. You have Post-it notes everywhere, and you go through, you draw out this process, and you um, talk about, identify redundancies and areas and pain points and all of these other goofy terms. And the whole point is to say, okay, well, we can make things easier. Well, I shouldn't say easier, but more efficient, more effective, right? And so we've gone through all this, and this led to just wild changes. And for a lot of us, a lot of these changes were fairly um, odd, to say the least. So it involved taking what we had was sort of a four desk um, arrangement where you were sitting next to people, but you were never looking at other people's screens. And they removed all of that, and for example, and made everyone into what they called a cell, which, if that wasn't a red flag enough, I don't know what was. It just very little. So at this point, there had been input, but no one really saw that input being implemented, at least not from our level, because certainly, given the reactions to some of these improvements, someone would have definitely stepped in. So things like, arranging people in a cell so everyone was sitting with their backs to one another, but everyone's screens were exposed, which, it's not that everyone was goofing around, but there was probably enough that in supervisors' minds it warranted having people's screens more open so that manager could always see what was on a person's screen. You're talking about a 12-hour shift, and to expect anyone to be sitting there in front of a screen doing color correction for 12 hours is lunacy, in my opinion. Just ridiculous, especially a third shift gig. Imagine uh, color correcting sweatshirts at 3 in the morning. Ugh. Anyway, so in addition to putting everyone in cells, which were these like 5, 6 seats, and the idea was that everyone that you needed to work with to complete the pre-press process was at hand, right? So you didn't have to go walking across the room. In theory, it worked, but in practice, it seemed to have more. There were other notes being hit, like surveillance, for example. And one was the one change that always sticks out, and the whole point of this long uh, tangent was that everyone was going to sit on the way the process worked is it would go from left to right. So you would have this made no sense because there was not a lot of this, you know, going. You didn't take a file and move it to the right hand person. This was all done online. And so, so why are we doing it this way? Well, because people are right-handed. So, of course, uh, nothing like a smartass with who's left-handed in the mix going, but I'm left-handed. This whole thing is going to break down, even though anyway. So, yeah, I that and the last one was they rebranded rather than calling it lean manufacturing, which again recalls Toyota approaches. They called it Cambio, which is the Italian name for um, change, according to what they were thinking. Turns out Cambio is uh, Italian for pocket change. Yeah, the owners are Italian, and so anyway, it was just one after the other. These hiccups where had they, and of course, nothing hierarchical changed. Managers and supervisors were still top heavy. There was an open door policy that was very much closed door. There was no input. I could go on and on if uh, But yeah, nothing like talking about a job from 20 years ago that you were not exactly thrilled about. Anyway, but one of the things that I definitely learned, and I'm thankful for that whole, it was 3.5 years I was there, was getting introduced to project management concepts. Maybe not so much the application, but just the concepts of equitable input, collaboration, everyone getting together. Okay, how are we going to make this better? And eliminating that sort of top level, or maybe not eliminating, but at least reducing the clout that managers have, and making sure that the input of the people who are actually engaged in that process are involved. So, uh, when I started teaching going on 12, 13 years ago, this was once I had the ability to create my own curricula and write out the syllabus and do my own things. One of the first things I started doing was building in debriefings, or what I ended up would call postmortems, because this is the class I was teaching was mostly computer scientists and or computer science or programming majors, and from that field we get postmortems. Okay, so they're a little bit more common, but they're emerging across other fields. Another, when I started doing these, the very first semester, a student commented like, "Oh, this is really cool. It's great that we have to, it's unfortunate that we have to take a writing class to learn about project management at this college. Turns out there was no project management instruction on at that campus, and I won't go into those details. However, the very next semester started implementing this throughout. Okay, even adding the pre-mortem stage, and a lot of this will sound familiar. A lot of it, if it doesn't already. You know, if you've ever taken a class or if you've ever taught a class where you send out that survey before the semester, say, hey, you know, are you good with technology? Whatever questions you come up with to sort of get, assess things. There's one important question about the pre-mortem process, and I won't spend a lot of time with this, but one question that I really like is imagine that, process X, project X, whatever, was a failure. Why did it fail? And so to be thinking ahead and be thinking about what sort of obstacles could occur and being aware of those is the first step in planning for it and mitigating those issues, right? So, in class, I would start off a semester with like, okay, imagine that you've just failed this course. Why did you do that? The reasons, responses were varied, mostly procrastination, right? So, okay, how do we work through procrastination? It helps me plan for the entire semester, which is great. Um, and then along the way, we do a number of these postmortems, which are sort of marketed in my class as check-ins, right? I got away from the postmortem terminology because um, one an instructor from another school. This was at the beginning of the pandemic. They said that's a really poor choice. Why would you use that? And I just had never thought about it. That's the terminology that was used. They were not familiar with it, and it was awkward to say the least, and rightfully so. Excuse me. So the I've gone back to this now because debrief it is a postmortem. I go back and forth between debriefings and postmortem. I think I return to the terminology of postmortem simply because we are, excuse me, moving out of it. I mean, it was barely over a year ago that we were removing masks here on campus, but it does seem like an eon ago. Um, but also that's what it's called, right? This is the professional term. Yes, we use debriefings as well, but I like the postmortem process because it does sound a little bit. I don't know. It just resonates a little bit more for a variety of reasons. So, uh, and also I've heard debriefings, and it's usually a the debriefings I've participated in are usually top down management, instructors, supervisors, whoever talking to an audience. There's really not a whole lot of collaboration happening. It's more of or it's not as collaborative as we would like. So the postmortem process is really all about collaborating. And in doing so, collaborating, excuse me, to improve a process. Okay. So, what is a postmortem? Uh, After half an hour of going on about my experience with them, what is it? It's simply a systematic approach to reflection. Okay. When I was in teaching first year writing courses, we did a lot of reflecting at the end of the semester, saying, okay, now that we've just gone through 16 weeks of this, what did you learn? Okay. And that never sat well with me. In fact, that was one of the first experiences. In fact, I did that quite a bit, even for first year writing classes during the pandemic, as a way of checking in and making sure, hey, what can we do to improve this situation? And so, if in a industrial um, environment, commercial environment, if you're talking about a workplace situation, taking time to, like I said, unpack it. This is where you start getting the um, post-it notes out. You start drawing out process maps and all that good stuff, making it more visual, and but then thinking about what went well and what didn't go so well. All right, so that's it. That's the basic gist of it. It does get more complicated than that, depending on your field. Computer science, again, who they've been doing this for decades, if not longer. They've got a very good system for doing it. There's all sorts of data that they're looking for, all sorts of components. For a classroom situation, it's a little bit different. For other professional organizations, it's also, it just depends. I think that's going back to my printing experience, or my experience in the printing world. I think that's one of the issues, is that there was not a recognition of the flexibility. Okay, there's no there are plenty of templates out there. There are plenty of guides, but there's no one correct way, only a correct view or perspective, and correct priorities to have when engaging in a postmortem process. Ultimately, however, your goal is to implement improvements, making small changes. There's when we start to, I'm not going to go into systems thinking, but um, Danella Meadows, which I could go on about more, incredible environmentalist, systems thinker, who really came down on a lot of approaches that they had at the time. Uh, when she would do, there's some stories that she has about um, going into consultations and just not even being frustrated, but just commenting on how misguided a lot of those approaches were. And one of the things that we try to do with a postmortem process, again, it's not quite, but one of the things we get from Meadows are those making those small changes that have a big impact. I think that's what the we're always after when we're engaging in a postmortem. Whether we get there or not is another story. Okay, but we want to improve efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, job uh, security. Yeah, what's the word? I'm trying to think of, not job security, but anyway, hopefully this efficiency and effectiveness leads to greater job satisfaction. That's what I'm looking for. All right. So the first thing, a few things to be thinking about, and again, a lot of this is for classroom purposes, so it's not a one size fits all situation. Wherever you're at doing a postmortem, for whatever purpose, a constructive, supportive mindset is incredibly important and crucial. Okay. We talk about this in design thinking a lot. There is no bad idea when you're brainstorming, when you're thinking of trying to come up with ideas. There's really nothing that is bad. Okay. And on the other side of this, especially with postmortem, when you're looking back at a past project, this is not about pointing fingers and placing blame for anything that went wrong. Okay, it's a team environment. This is the nature and essence of collaboration. You're not out there to identify what went wrong because of a single person, because there are probably reasons that that person, uh, for whatever, made a mistake, didn't know. Okay, these are things that we need to think about. Okay, there's usually something behind it in a classroom situation. In my experience, if someone has ghosted a for a group project, it's usually because of something very significant, and compounded with guilt, compounded with a poor response from other group members, this leads to escalation and just always ends up badly. I've only had that happen, I believe, twice. And in each situation, it was resolved within the group. They took their own methods for taking care of it, and they had my blessing for doing so. Okay, it's another reason I like this approach, these postmortems, and getting people thinking about this constructive. That mindset is so important. As an instructor, I don't want to be holding hands when you're having interpersonal issues. Okay, yes, that is part of my role. I'm more than happy to step in if need be. I usually just say, hey, copy me on an email, right? Let that person know if someone isn't participating, copy me on an email. Let that person know that I've been informed of this, and that usually kicks things off. But uh, again, maybe half a dozen times that's happened. By the time you get to the group project and working together again, it's really helpful. I find the postmortem is really helpful to get people thinking about mitigating their own issues within their own group. All right, so the postmortem process is inquiry based. So a lot of probing questions, a lot of drilling down, and a lot of identifying, okay, what went well and what went not so well. Uh, done. If you look around, you'll see most resources will have, say, like that those questions are sent out in a survey, sent out a few days in advance. This is usually done immediately or as soon as possible after the completion of a project when everything is still fresh, right? So you send out a survey, then you come to once you have a sense of those questions. In my class, I have everyone write something out and submit it so that when we come back, we do a little bit of discussion in class. So in the professional realm, what will usually happen is individuals will come together, a good session, separate. Sometimes people go on retreats to do this. I've done that a few times. And you just start to go through these questions, and each individual will contribute their part. It's really important that everyone, if you're going to be a part of this process, you have to contribute. It's important to have everyone's input. I had a question actually yesterday in class. Well, if I don't have anything to say, do I have to write anything? And my, I it took me a second to think about that because I had never been asked that before. And in hindsight, the proper response, and I couldn't even tell you what I responded because I was thinking out loud essentially. The proper response is yes, absolutely. Okay, you should be writing something. If you don't have any, none of these questions warrant blank answers. Okay, there's always something to be said. Even the challenge then is okay. What exactly is like so a few questions and I'm going to blaze through these in a second because if you're watching this for a class you've already seen the questions, and if for whatever reason you're not in one of these classes and watching this, um, I'll just skim through them. All right, so again, the goal for the postmortem is to your any sort of achievable action. What can we do? And again, thinking about it, if you're going through this process, and if I say, well, communication's not been so good, what are you using to communicate? Mostly email. And it turns out most people aren't even using email, checking their emails regularly. Well, that's your problem. Okay, then you address that. What's your achievable action? Find another method and agree upon a method for communicating. That's usually the first step in my classes. Okay, sharing findings with others. Yeah, so all those answers to the questions that were asked, making sure that those are open and everyone is able to view those. And then documenting key takeaways. This is where the writing comes in, right? What are the takeaways? What did we learn from this? Email bad, Discord better, whatever, the Slack better, whatever it is. Team agreed to use Slack for all interpersonal communications, and we'll do a better job of checking at least 3 times a day, for example, right? So it's those types of steps, and again, design thinking here. and I know this is not something I've talked about at all, I don't think, on this um, series, but one of the things that you keep in mind with design thinking is that you have to test it first, right? It's iterative. So if I say, okay, we're going to try Slack, well, no one's checking Slack, so we got to try something else, and you just keep doing this until something works out. So this is not something where everyone comes in, manager tells you something went wrong. Why did this go wrong? Let's change it. Okay, this is what we're going to do, and that's it. And if it doesn't work, then we're going to do this again and figure out who's responsible. So we are eliminating a lot of these conventions of professional improvement. All right, so just a few questions that we have that I've been using that I used this semester in class, right? How has your experience in the course been so far? Very vague, very open. A lot of answers could come from this, right? Are we talking about the course specifically, in class, outside of class? There's a lot of interpretive power that's given here. What aspects of the course have been the most challenging? So here's where trying to see um, what I want the courses to be challenging. I don't necessarily want it to be overwhelming, right? So again, what are some of the areas that have been challenging students? It's usually the professional tone. For example, the memo writing is usually challenging. How have you managed your workload time this semester? Uh, this is more of a reflective question, right? Where we're saying, okay, how have things been going? We're starting to move outside of the class, right? Starting to think, okay, all of that's going on. Again, this is also a good opportunity for everyone in the class to be taking stock, thinking about how have things been going, and just taking time. A lot of this, what's funny about postmortems is none of this is unfamiliar. Most of us have done some component of this. We rarely intentionally take the time to do it. And that's really important. Okay. So again, taking time outside of the workload, like we're doing in class, taking time sort of sidestepping, as I call it, the semester and engaging in this, it's not quite a break. We're still doing a lot of the things that we do in a professional writing class, but using it as a way of self-assessment, right? And also checking in with, and same here, have you been active in class discussions? What have been your most successful work strategies this semester? Here's one. We're not just focusing on the negative. We focus on obstacles only because we want to, hopefully someone else in the group might have some input that can be really valuable in helping to overcome that. So what have been your most successful work strategies been this semester? What have been your most successful work strategy? Okay. Um, this is an opportunity to say, okay, this is how I do this. This is how I manage time. Okay, paired with these two, there's a logical sort of flow to this. Are you feeling confident with the course material so far? Anything? Okay, again, halfway through the semester, checking in before we move ahead. Do you have all the concepts down? Are you confident you get what we're talking about with consistency, purpose, audience, all of that good stuff, right? What are your academic goals for the rest of the semester? Again, thinking also what's coming ahead. With the next 7 weeks, what do we have coming down the pipeline that we have to be aware of? Graduation events, traveling, nice weather, whatever it is. What are our goals going to be? How are we going to, again, taking stock, thinking ahead, and addressing any sort of issues, or at least anticipating them? And then finally, any questions or concerns. Now, this is very, very light, okay? These are not hard-hitting questions. They're not certainly not questions that would take 4 hours to answer, right? We usually do them as much as we can in class, and we'll do it again on Wednesday for my in-person courses anyway. So then what ends up happening is in fact, I wonder if I can find it. What we have in, for my purposes, is this template that gives you sort of a general overview. Okay, I'm starting to get very reluctant to give templates because it usually means too often people just use a template and don't actually change it, which in many cases that's fine, but in our course it's usually want a little bit more in depth. But anyway, it's like overview, working process, communication, results, lessons learned, conclusion, all that good stuff, right? So it's a way of documenting it. And so in a classroom situation, it's only valuable for me because I'm the only one who really checks that information. But it's helpful for me because I can determine, okay, so what are some of the successes? Like the reason I do certain things in my classes is because of these types of activities, right? This is how I get feedback from students as we're going through the course rather than a reflection or rather than an evaluation at the end of the semester when I can only change something for the next course, maybe if I think about it, right? Anyway, so that's the documentation component of it. It's fairly straightforward. In professional practice, it's a form of documenting, it's like a snapshot in history. It's a way of, again, if we're thinking about, to go back to design thinking, we have our problem statement. Okay, problem statements, mission statements, statement of goals. These all these bits of writing can come from post-mortems, all right, and give us a sort of a signpost to look to whenever we're losing focus or losing track. Excuse me. All right, I'm going to probably go a little bit long today because I do want to spend some time looking at this stuff. Chat GPT. All right, so let's. In fact, I'm gonna take a little bit of a break here and set things up. Make sure I'm on the right. Got everything up and running. Looks like I do, but I'm just gonna pause for a second. All right. Let's spend a few minutes. I just want to. This actually might be. This probably warrants another video, but if yeah, I know some students watch this little video series, so I want to spend some little bit of time introducing Chat GPT and some more specifically just some of the other tools that are out there. And I just want to do a quick demonstration. If you're not familiar with this, I just want to spend a couple minutes going over it and just show some uh, pitfalls of using this. Okay. So I am, as we've been talking about this since November now, there used to be two camps that people fell into. As you were either, as an instructor, you either love it or you hate it. You won't have anything to do with it. Now that has sort of expanded to five or six, maybe even more camps at this point, where you're interested, but you're not gonna pursue it. You'll wait and see what happens. And I'm in that camp where I I fancy myself a realist, I guess. I don't see this going away. I don't see this. Uh, I don't see AI assisted writing as going anywhere except improving, so long as it's not controlled by one or two stakeholders. Um, if, for example, Google were the only person, or Microsoft, if those were the only two players with this technology, there would be issues. Fortunately, it does seem like there are a number of actors and tech savvy people out there who are taking it upon themselves, trying to keep it open access as much as possible and creating some tools out of it. In the meantime, however, we've got all sorts of tools coming out of the woodwork. Regardless of what you think, these tools have an amazing capacity to virtually eliminate all of the mundane tasks associated with writing. Terrible at creative writing, terrible with humor, terrible with research, um, although not as bad as you would think as long as you're careful. Um, I take that back. It's also bad at research writing, depending on it's for whatever reason really bad at basic math. Um, for example, I said just so we've got this workshop coming up on Friday, and just out of curiosity, I've got our outline here. I just wanted to see what ChatGPT would do, and it cranked out a an outline that was 20 minutes longer than what I had specifically asked it to produce. So I think it was like an hour and 20 minutes, whatever. So it's finicky in really weird ways, and I know that there is a technique I have not mastered yet to for prompt engineering. I have not gotten there yet. I would love to. I've done it more with Disco Diffusion and creating uh, images. I won't call it artwork. Call it images. But I will. But anyway, so this is ChatGPT, and I've paid for the plus version for the sake of having regular access. If you've been using this the last few days or last month, I guess, you know that is still hit or miss. Okay, uh, the legacy model is using GPT 3.5. They recently came out with 4, which, as you can see, is according to OpenAI's website, is vastly improved reasoning and conciseness, where speed remains the same. It does feel a little bit slower to me. And to be honest, I haven't noticed a lot of difference. I usually end up just using 3.5 because the it was for a bit faster. Uh, but let's try some things out. Okay, so let's see. Write an email asking about your up. So if you're like me, I recently submitted an email asking about volunteering with the Ice Age Trail. So, if you're like me, you spend way too much time writing emails. It's usually because I want the wording to be correct. I'm want the organization to be good. I want it to be short enough. Um, so, write an email asking about volunteers. And so it cranks out this very professional, structurally sound email. The first time using this, it was fantastic. No, so it goes through the whole. I hope this finds you well. My name is gives me a little thank you, and I'm writing to inquire about volunteer opportunities with the Ice Age Trail. If I were an instructor, this is exactly how I would ask students to write an email. Right? I hope this finds you well. Maybe even eliminating that, depending on your style. My name is, and I am writing to inquire about volunteer purposes right ahead. I mean, if you sent this to me, I'd be like, great, go for it. I'm a passionate outdoor enthusiast and would love to contribute my time and efforts to the preservation and maintenance of this beautiful trail. That's cool. I can't stand the word passionate though. I every time I see the word passion or passionate in an email or some sort of professional writing, it really grinds my gears. It's just too cliched. No one is. I mean, yeah, you can be a passionate outdoor enthusiast, but maybe it's a little redundant. Let's say out out of curiosity because I could always edit that right. My name is, and I'm an outdoor enthusiast, and so it goes through the whole thing. I'm just kind of curious. I am familiar with the Ice Age Trail, so it's basically just gonna end its role. So it's interesting when I remove passionate, it also removes other. Are those adverbs? I'm familiar with Ice Age Trail, and it's I really believe those are so important. Can you please provide me with more information about the current volunteer? Yeah, so this is pretty much it. Whatever. So it writes a pretty good email. Um, but maybe I want it to be shorter. Right, so it's going to do the same thing, and it will probably crank out something a little bit shorter. Usually does. All right, so we skimmed off a few lines there, but it maintained the core of what we're looking for in a professional email. So this is pretty solid. Okay. Now, if your line of work involves a lot of email writing, this could be incredibly handy. It can also do things that are far more complicated that I'm not going to get into. It's also just entertaining to play around with. Used to be that these would be saved. In fact, what? So again, there are a lot of issues with this service as it stands right now. Like sometimes you'll open it up and all of your previous chats will be there. Uh, Today, however, they're not visible. There have also been reports of people seeing other people's. Um, so not a place if you value privacy. That's for sure. Interesting. I mean, if you hadn't already figured this out, what all of this is based on is all of that data that we've been contributing to all those emails we've been writing on Gmail, all of those. Uh, I would be willing to bet that everything you've ever written on a internet connected computer is somehow in the eventual, like, I know Google is coming out with one that's much bigger. So what they're doing is taking sets of information basically, and use from that information you're sort of anticipating what the next word will be, right? So this is what a typical email asking about volunteer opportunities, based on the millions of emails that have been written up to do something similar. This software basically anticipates what that email is going to look like. And so it's usually right on, because think about it. How, as long as we have been writing using digital tools, we've also been, we've had spell checker to help us out. We've had autocomplete, autocorrect, all of these other smaller technologies embedded in our tools that help our writing. Okay. So there's, um, it shouldn't be a surprise that our emails, our any sort of professional writing looks very vanilla, very uh, familiar. Okay, because we've been writing like this for a while now. Okay, all right. So let's see. Curious. Yeah, it's unfortunate that everything's saved. A lot of issues because cap of 25 messages every 3 hours. So compose and firing about. And it'll probably crank out something similar. Enthusiastic volunteer inquiry for the Ice Age Trail. You can even see it's a little bit slower. I recently came across some information about the Ice Age Trail and was fascinated by its rich history and the incredible natural beauty it has to offer. This one's going into some a little bit more detail, and it almost feels as though it is pulling from some more relevant information. So rather than just saying, give me a generic email that could be about inquiring about any sort of volunteerism for any organization, rich history and incredible natural beauties, definitely speaking to the Ice Age Trail specifically. Again, passionate. Ugh. Appreciate any guidance. It's a little bit long-winded. Oh my goodness. And it takes taking a little bit longer. It, so it's interesting when it comes down to it. Good Lord, it's a long email. So when it comes down to it, there's actually this question has come up in my mind, like how much time does it actually save? Even in those cases, however, where it doesn't necessarily save time, it definitely saves energy, right? I'm not, I could, if I were to take this, I would probably have some minor edits. I could probably say I wanted it half the length. I could also go so far as to just add things like replace the word passionate with something. Um, so we'll see what's going to go on. It does, man, it seems so much slower. So, and we are at time. So, and I think I'm gonna do another video of this, but I do want to spend a little bit more time off camera, you know, provide coming up with some good techniques for prompt engineering. I notice how much shorter this is. This is what I would say is a much better email. I recently discovered the Ice Age Trail. I'm eager to contribute as a volunteer. Great. Experience in trail maintenance. This is much better. Can you please provide? Great. This is, I think you can reach me at your email address or phone number if you need more information. Great. This is an email that I would probably copy, paste, tweak within a minute and send it on its way. So it's probably it would save me maybe 2 3 minutes for a simple email. For other purposes, however, it also does a pretty good job of that. Write a short report with headings and subheads about the so the other thing to think about is that the model that it's pulling, the information that these models are pulling from, only go up to I think September of 2021. So you're talking about a year and a half gap, um, and so it may say something to that end. Maybe it won't. And so I'm gonna let this go in the background, and I'll go back to it in a second. So one other thing I want to go over, and one of the reasons that prompted me to sort of take a side road here, so when I opened up, let's see, so I was experimenting with it before again. So regenerate, copy, stop. If I can. All right. So one of the other things I was when I checked anything, most things I do with work are relegated to Microsoft Edge. Try to keep everything in the Microsoft ecology because that's what we use on campus. Clicked on something in an email, and lo and behold, we've now integrated a lot of this technology in right into our browser here. So I'm looking at MIT Tech Review, and lo and behold, here it is. So we've got the same chat function. So if I want to say, let's see, it comes up with. So, and we just watched a presentation from Microsoft. They're going to be integrating all of this into all of their tools. So within a matter of months, I believe, we're going to be getting a this functionality is going to be embedded in PowerPoint, Word, Teams, Excel for sure. So this one is actually kind of nice because it provides me with links, which ChatGPT, my experience, the links that it provides are usually pretty lousy. All right, so this one's giving me links for this, which is great. The chat is good, um, interesting, good. So I'm so based. Oh, okay. I was hoping it would pull from the chat findings, and but oh well. Let's go ahead and stop that. Terrible button here. It doesn't even look like a button. All right, so here's new topic. So that's pretty good. It gives you the links, and so this is, it's okay. It's basically doing a Google search. Let's see. So again, with composing, thing, paragraph. Keep it short, and let's see what they give us. Notice this one is what does Grammarly say about this? It's all a few things. I am writing to express my interest in volunteering with your organization. I've been following your work for a while, and I admire your mission to create, support, and protect the Ice Age Trail, lowercase. I would love to contribute to this cause in any way I can. So this is even more generic than the ChatGPT one was. However, is it adequate? Um, I don't know. I think at this when it gets this one, I almost think it would take me longer to edit it than anything else. Maybe it's write an email. So one of the things that they about creating prompts is usually trying something with the same uh, using different terminologies, different verbiage can help create a more precise one. So if I this let's try it. So another nice thing is that this you could create different types of ideas. See, I'm a huge fan of the Ice Age Trail, and I would love to get involved. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I think it's more remarkable that this is built into the browser. I think that's more interesting than anything. All right, so but let's look at a few other tools. Okay, these are the links. I mean, that's kind of nice that it brings up those links. Here is the short report. Um, that was very short. There's really nothing there, which is fine. But, one of the things that's handy about this is putting together some ideas. So if you've got something already in the works, say an outline for a workshop, it's a good way to look and say, okay, is there anything I'm missing? Now, those gaps that uh, ChatGPT is filling may or may not be correct. So, um, my anticipation is our editing chops are going to have to be vastly improved going forward. Writing for sure, but more specifically, research, inquiry, critical thinking, all of those skills are going to become even more important now because God help us if we're just assuming that what is being cranked out by this is on point. All right. While I was taking a breather a few minutes ago, got an email from Google saying I could get on the wait list for Bard, their version of this. Okay, so this is what they're adding to it. Um, OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, have a very small, relatively small data set that they're working for. Billions of pages worth of web content. Google, far, far superior. Again, I think that in remembering this from a couple weeks ago, so that may have changed. So when Google, who's been in the search business as long as there's been search, Gmail, all Google Cloud, all of those services that we use, I've been invested in the Google ecology for a number of years now. Got a Pixel phone. All of that information is being utilized, right? Now, what I think everyone would like is, and I believe there may actually be projects that are working on this or have accomplished this, is taking all of your information. So if I took every email that I've ever written, dumped it into this pot and said, and use that pot to create a variety of different writings that would use the language that I use, that would use the tone that I use, that would be we would get glimpses of this from autocomplete. I think that was one of the promises that we hoped uh, autocomplete would give us, but never really saw that happening. So we've got Google. We'll see what happens with there. So earlier, I asked Notion, which is a collaborative writing tool. I know they've got AI embedded in it, and so I'm going to go ahead and what do they do? Ask AI to write a list of AI. It comes up. All right, so it's going to give me a little bit different than what I got before, slightly different. Okay, so Grammarly for sure. All right, so it gives me this list. Hemingway Editor was an interesting one. I looked at it, and it's not, to my knowledge, AI powered in the way that others are. It's very, very nice. I won't go into it, but so again, it's not as. Here's one: academic writing is hard. What is this one? Writeful. Okay, so it can generate abstracts, download for Word, down for. Ooh, interesting. That'll be an interesting one to check out. So that's installing. Every was one. I tried this out not too long ago. I can't remember the name of it, but it's Lex, their AI-based writing app. I thought it was okay. It is um, Every seems to be a blogging service. A lot of articles. So here is $1 for 2 weeks. I did that. $200 a year. No thanks. Basically writing a lot of web content. It's great for that. So Lex was one. I'm trying to think of another one. Copy AI is one that I just found out about from another search actually. So this one is interesting. Gives you some more details and some more information. Let's see how this is going. It the So all sorts of functions. I'm not even going to spend time with this because I believe this one's 35 a month. Yeah, 36 a month. So there's all of these tools out there in the market right now. Everyone's jumping onto this bandwagon, and rightfully so. There's a lot of uh, I don't want to say opportunity because it's a little bit more optimistic. I think the market's going to be flooded, and I hoping that the dust settles relatively soon so we can get some products that actually work, are reliable, and are helpful. Okay, so we've got. Okay, so that's ChatGPT. Let's go. I will say go. Where's the other thing you can do is go onto the playground, which I'm sure it's somewhere, but anyway, all sorts of tools. A lot of options out there, and I think what I'm gonna do is just hold off on the rest of this for now and create something a little bit more. Once when I get a good compilation of writing tools put together, I'll do a video about those. Anyway, have a great week.